Hey there, this is Dave Julian. Doing just a little demo here in Photoshop. I'm going to be showing some specific things about compositing, but I realized that it's just as important to understand how to set up Photoshop in order for you to be able to follow my demos for the workshop or class, as well as just for the certain behaviors that I think make Photoshop a lot more fun to use. So to do that, first of all, I'm on a Macintosh computer, so one or two things I show you may be different on a PC. In order to get to the Photoshop settings, I go under the Photoshop menu here and go to settings. This is a whole list of different kinds of settings, but we're going to start here with general. If you're on a PC, those may be under your file or edit menu. Going to general, again, there are many types of settings here that we're not really concerned with. For instance, this first page is perfect to leave just as is. Interface, you can leave that as default. Workspace, these are my particular favorite settings, and they may even be default on your version. Notifications, really nothing important here except tooltips is most likely selected already on yours. And tooltips are nice because that way if you hover over a tool you're unfamiliar with while you're working in Photoshop, it will fly out with the name of that tool, which I think is a great way to learn Photoshop. Now, going under tools, there really isn't anything you have to change here. I like animated zoom. Anything else, anything you have set up here will be just fine, and the defaults are just fine too. History and content credentials, I'm not really addressing that in this workshop or classes, so we don't have to talk about that specifically. File handling, this is kind of important. Everything here can be checked off. This is an important one for me as I've been working in Photoshop for many, many years. I prefer the way they used to do the save as dialog because it gives you access to all the different kinds of file types you may want to save a document out to. If you're working in a cloud-based environment, meaning you're using the Adobe Creative Cloud as a storage for all of your files that you create with Adobe software, then this may be defaulted to on your in the cloud here. I like all my files to be on my computer, so that's why that's selected that way. File extension, yes, your PSD, TIFFs, JPEGs, whatever, can be lower or uppercase. Image previews set to auto, always save, and that way if you open your files or if you want to look at your files on your desktop or in a different application, it's nice to have a preview of what you last saved that file to look like. And so Photoshop actually creates a preview that can be seen on your desktop or in Windows Explorer. Save to the original folder, I like that. Save in background, also great, so you can continue to do things. And again, enable legacy save as is my favorite way of working. Yours may be different at your option. Now, this is an important thing here, camera raw preferences. Camera raw preferences determines how the interface that opens when you open a raw file or a DNG file into Adobe Photoshop. It'll always open through the camera raw interface first. And there are just a couple things that are worth setting here. Not going to go into some of the more detailed things here, but I think they're useful to at least go through a few of these. Yes, you can always have this selected here. Use embedded JPEG previews. That may or may not matter to you, so you can leave it checked on or not. We'll just check it on for now. Now, this is kind of important because this determines whether or not files that you double click to open or open with Photoshop, for instance, as an option from other applications. I don't want Photoshop to open into RAW every time I double click a JPEG, every time I double click a TIFF file, which is most likely a layered file, or it wouldn't be a TIFF in my computer. So I don't really want these to be enabled to be opened in Camera Raw. AVIF files I don't use, and I don't use JPEG XL, so I left those alone. Again, what this means is that this disables that JPEGs will open in Camera Raw. Now, if you shoot JPEGs and you have a lot of files as JPEGs that you would love to have open in Camera Raw when you first double-click them, then it's kind of nice to just leave that automatically open JPEGs and HEICs with settings, or open all supported. And what that'll do is give you a way of developing or changing the look of those as you open them into Photoshop, rather than opening them into Photoshop as layers and then changing their look from in there. Totally up to you. They will not open as a smart object because they are not raw files. So I'm going to leave that on disabled. I don't need them to be smart objects. Performance. You don't have to change anything here. Adobe products, look at your computer and choose the most advantageous performance configuration, so I don't really have to touch that. And defaults, other things like that are less important. Workflow is important. The color space I'm asking you to consider working in is Adobe RGB, because it's a larger space for more colors to be seen than sRGB, which is what a lot of your cameras are recording in. You'll be hearing about ProPhoto RGB from a lot of photo professionals, but most of us don't own monitors or displays that are capable of seeing a lot of the color in ProPhoto RGB. So for now, I'm sticking with what's always worked, what's always helped me get the best prints that I do. So I'm sticking with Adobe RGB now. If another instructor says always work in ProPhoto, go for it. I also feel that it's important when you open up photos to be the backgrounds of your composites, then 16 bits per channel is a much better color space, bit depth, I should say, to work in, because it allows you to have many more tonal controls, or I should say, it allowed you to have better tonal control, and especially in gradations, skies, skin tones, and things like that. So it'll double your file size, but I think it's worth it in the end. And you can always convert down to 8 bits when you've reached the end of your compositing to save a lot of space, and just because your printers don't really care if you have 16 or 8-bit. So for now, leave it at 16-bit. And image sizing, well, this is really something that you're not most likely going to be operating with here. This has more to do with what the defaults are. What I like to do is uncheck that so that things natively open up in their default camera size, whatever you've shot it in. And it'll automatically make the resolution 300 pixels per inch. So let's leave that there for now. No sharpening. And this is important. If you want all files to open in Photoshop as a smart object, then check this off. All the things that we're checking off now can be done on the fly from inside the Camera Raw interface. There's a little link at the very bottom of the window in Camera Raw that basically leads to this exact setup. So if you are enabling JPEGs and TIFFs to open up in Adobe Camera Raw, then they will open up as a smart object in Photoshop. Even if they're not raw files that you opened in Photoshop, they will become smart objects. And the only advantage to that is if you decide to go into the Camera Raw filter in Photoshop and start working on them with the sliders and other tools that you're used to having in Lightroom. So that's totally an option. The cool thing is that if you do open things up in Photoshop as smart objects, you can always change them back to being rasterized layers or non-smart objects. So it doesn't hurt to have that open for now. Technology previews is nothing that we really need to be concerned about right now. But what it does allow you as this grows is by having this checked off, which is, by the way, a default, it'll always show you the newest AI features, which enables generative expand. And that's a really, really helpful feature that we're going to be taking advantage of. And that's the way that you can expand the width or height of any photo with the AI generation of of the edges that you're creating that weren't there. Again, changes will take effect after restarting Photoshop. Important to know. So we just set the camera raw preferences, but there's more that we need to do here. I am just leaving all of this alone right now. None of this has to be changed. Export, this is already set properly, but quick export is something different than saving as. So I'm going to leave this alone, even though it's got the bad word of sRGB, and we're not dealing with quick export. Performance. This you can leave alone because, again, Adobe products are analyzing your computer and presetting what it thinks is the best performance settings for your working. Image processing, don't touch it. Scratch disks, not necessary unless you have external high-speed disks that you're asking Photoshop to write files to. Cursors, this is important to me. The standard cursors look like this. They look like whatever tool you've selected, and then you get a slight hint of what your brush size is in that color. But I like normal brush tip, which shows the actual width of the brush that you've selected much better. And I like precise because it changes this into a target, so that if you decide to use your eyedropper to pick a color in one of your files, then this gives you a more precise location than that. They may look the same, but you'll see the difference when you're working. You can use full-size brush tip, and what that does is, the purpose of full-size brush tip is to show you what the very outermost tones may be, or pixels may be, if you were to use a very soft feathered brush. And as we know, feathered brushes have a very soft fall off from the center to the outside, and some small pixels might be available as a result of using a brush that is basically that size, but it's highly feathered. So this just gives you a sense of what the most possible feathered might look like. Now that said, it can sometimes fool you into what brush you're actually going to be using, what brush size. So let's start with normal brush tip for now. Nothing else has to change here. Transparency and gamut I'm going to address in class, because when you work with Photoshop out of the box, it's set up to look roughly like this. That means that transparent areas in your composite will look like a checkerboard. And as you get to become more facile with Photoshop, you're going to get tired of looking at the checkerboard most likely, and you're going to want to change it. So for now, we can change it to a smaller checkerboard, and if you want a less vivid checkerboard so that you can see the edges of your objects more clearly, then you can even change the swatches. So here's the light, here's the gray swatch. If I click on the gray swatch, I can vary that up to a slightly lighter gray swatch, as you can see here. And now the checkerboard fades, so I can still see where the transparent places are in my work, but I'm not so jarred by the visual of that contrasty checkerboard look. Eventually, when you get really facile with Photoshop, as I am, you will turn it to none, and that will give you no indication of where the transparent parts are of your layers, but you won't really need it because you will have gained enough knowledge of Photoshop to know how to look at your files and know where your transparent areas are. So it's always an option to leave it on small, changing the gray swatch to be more subtle, and that way you're kind of meeting the best of both worlds. Nothing else here needs to be changed, so we can just leave that alone. I'm visiting this one just to see if they've thrown me anything interesting since then. No. So once you've done this, you say okay, and then in order for all of the changes you made to take place, you actually need to relaunch Photoshop. I'm not going to do that right now because I'm in the middle of a demo with you. So I'm going to leave this as is, and that's the end of this video. It was just about setting up Photoshop. Thank you for watching.